The first thing you must understand when it comes to recognizing a toxic or evil person is energy. Everything about a person is energy, how they speak, move, breathe, and even how they make space around them. Some people carry a light and some people carry a darkness that is subtle but undeniable if you know how to read it. Energy is not something you can see with your eyes, yet it is the most accurate mirror of someone's true character. You may meet someone who smiles at you, who speaks in soothing tones, who appears to be kind or even charming, but if you feel heavy, restless, or tense in their presence, your energy is alerting you. The body always knows before the mind has a chance to rationalize. Evil people have mastered the art of camouflage. They can blend into the environment, mimic warmth, and mirror the emotions of others to gain trust. But despite their ability to mask themselves, their energy always leaks in small ways. It could be a subtle tension in your chest when you talk to them, a sinking feeling in your stomach, or an inexplicable sense of unease that you dismiss as paranoia. This is your intuition communicating with you through your body's energy sensors. It is the first line of defense that separates those who are spiritually awake from those who are oblivious. Pay attention to how you feel after interacting with someone. Do you feel lighter, inspired, and motivated, or do you feel drained, anxious, and confused? A person with malicious intentions rarely energizes anyone. They absorb energy instead. Their energy is like a vacuum. They pull confidence, joy, and peace from you to satisfy their need for control. Sometimes it is so subtle that you cannot identify exactly why you feel off, and this is exactly what they rely on, the confusion. The evil person's presence is a slow, creeping erosion of your vitality, often masked by compliments, flattery, or seemingly benign conversations. The moment you start observing energy instead of words, you begin to notice patterns. Perhaps after speaking with someone, you find yourself overthinking, questioning your decisions, or doubting your worth. This is not coincidence, it is energy manipulation. Their presence leaves imprints on your emotional state. You might not even be aware that their energy lingers long after they leave. You carry fragments of their negativity with you, as if a shadow has brushed past your life. And the reason this works so effectively is that most people focus only on logic, on reasoning, and on visible actions, ignoring the subtle currents of energy that are far more telling. Learning to sense energy requires practice, patience, and honesty with yourself. You must quiet your mind and listen to your body. Notice when tension arises without cause, when anxiety spikes for no apparent reason, or when a conversation leaves a residue of doubt. These are not your weaknesses, these are your instincts signaling danger. Evil people feed on those who ignore their inner warnings, those who rely only on appearances, charm, or persuasive words. They know that most people are trained to trust the mask rather than the feeling, and they exploit it relentlessly. Energy sensing is not just about noticing discomfort, it is about recognizing the subtle forms of control embedded in the other person's presence. Their energy may seem calm, but calm can be a mask for quiet manipulation. They may appear friendly, but friendliness does not always align with genuine warmth. You learn to differentiate between energy that nourishes you and energy that depletes you. One will leave you feeling invigorated, clear-minded, and expansive, while the other will leave you weary, confused, and shrinking into yourself without understanding why. The difference is rarely verbal, rarely rational, it is purely energetic. Observe the micro-expressions, the micro-movements, and the subtle vibrations in a person's presence. Notice how their energy interacts with the space around them. Evil people often create tension without making a sound. Their energy is heavy, invasive, and insistent. It lingers like a fog, and if you are sensitive to energy, you will notice a subtle tightening in your chest, a subtle pressure in your mind, or an urge to escape that seems irrational at first. This is not irrational. This is your body and spirit protecting you, signaling that the person's energy is not aligned with integrity or honesty. Trusting energy also requires detachment. You cannot allow fear or preconceived notions to color your perception. You must observe without judgment, without forcing an immediate decision. The evil person often tries to provoke emotional responses, anger, fear, guilt, to distort your energy and break your inner calm. But if you remain grounded, attuned to the shifts in energy rather than the words, you see clearly. Energy does not lie. No matter how clever the mask, no matter how well crafted the charm, the underlying currents of energy will always reveal the truth. Developing this sense of energy allows you to act preemptively rather than reactively. You begin to notice the drain before it becomes overwhelming. You step back, protect your space, and assert your boundaries before their subtle invasions can take root. Energy sensing is not paranoia, it is clarity. It is the wisdom of the body, the soul, and the mind converging to reveal patterns that intellect alone cannot detect. It is the first warning, the earliest signal that someone in your life is not aligned with your well-being, and it is a skill that once honed will serve you for a lifetime. One of the most obvious signs that someone harbors darkness in their heart is their relationship with truth. Evil people rarely operate with transparency. They manipulate situations, words, and perceptions to control outcomes in their favor, and they do it so seamlessly that most people fail to notice. Manipulation is not always loud or aggressive. It is subtle, quiet, and often wrapped in layers of charm, logic, and feigned concern. Transparency, on the other hand, demands vulnerability, honesty, and accountability, qualities that those with malevolent intent consistently avoid. Recognizing the difference between manipulation and transparency is crucial, for it is here that the true nature of a person reveals itself. Manipulation begins with language. A person who prefers manipulation over transparency will never allow you to see the full picture. Their words are chosen with care, designed to evoke specific emotions, steer your decisions, and create dependency. They twist facts, omit critical details, and present events in a way that benefits them. Often, they use confusion as a tool, embedding contradictions and half-truths so that you question your own judgment. They understand the power of ambiguity because ambiguity weakens the mind and leaves the heart vulnerable. A person who hides their true intentions will never speak directly. They will speak in riddles, in suggestions, in helpful advice that is secretly a trap. Beyond language, manipulation reveals itself in behavior. Watch how they respond when confronted with honesty. A transparent person meets confrontation with calmness, clarity, and accountability. They own their actions and communicate openly, even when the truth is uncomfortable. The manipulator, however, deflects excuses and redirects. They may laugh off serious concerns, shift blame subtly, or portray themselves as the victim in order to confuse you. Emotional turbulence becomes their tool, and your discomfort becomes their advantage. They exploit your empathy, patience, and rationality to control the narrative while never exposing their true motives. Manipulation is also a game of control. People who operate with evil intentions often manipulate the environment around them to maintain dominance. They create situations where their influence appears indispensable, making you rely on their guidance or decisions. Transparency would expose this control, for it would require them to admit limits, weaknesses, and mistakes. But the manipulator cannot allow exposure. They construct illusion, weaving an intricate web where truth is scarce and their influence feels necessary. Every interaction is measured, calibrated, and executed to maximize their advantage, leaving you unwittingly entangled in their schemes. A crucial aspect of manipulation is the exploitation of trust. When someone is truly transparent, trust is earned through consistency and openness. Manipulators, however, understand how to leverage your trust against you. They offer glimpses of honesty, moments of apparent vulnerability, and selective truths to lull you into comfort, only to exploit these openings later. You may find yourself defending them, justifying their actions, or feeling guilty for questioning them. This is the silent art of manipulation. Their transparency is always conditional, calculated, and incomplete, leaving you with a distorted perception of reality. Manipulation over transparency also affects the way they communicate emotionally. They are masters at emotional entanglement, making you feel responsible for their feelings, moods, and reactions. They will frame situations to provoke guilt, fear, or obligation, convincing you that your actions or decisions directly affect their well-being. A person acting with honesty expresses emotions but does not weaponize them. The manipulator, however, weaponizes every emotion, turning empathy into a tool for control. Your intuition may sense something is off, yet their skillful veneer of sincerity can be convincing, making you question your instincts and doubt your perception of reality. One way to see through manipulation is to examine consistency. Transparent individuals behave in ways that align with their words, values, and actions. Manipulators rarely do. They shift their behavior to fit their desired outcome, bending truth and reality to suit their needs. Promises are broken with subtle excuses, agreements are reframed, and loyalties are questioned. Their moral compass is flexible, designed not to guide but to serve their strategy. Transparency demands alignment between intention and action. Manipulation thrives in the gap between what is said and what is done, and this gap is where most people are ensnared. Manipulation over transparency is also evident in the way they handle information. Information becomes currency, weaponized to gain leverage, intimidate, or destabilize. They may leak selective truths, spread rumors subtly, or twist conversations to create conflict, all without appearing culpable. This behavior cultivates dependence, fear, or admiration in others, making them susceptible to further manipulation. A transparent person shares knowledge freely, allowing others to make informed choices without hidden agendas. The manipulator, however, hoards, distorts, and directs information to control perception and outcomes. Recognizing manipulation requires awareness of both external cues and internal reactions. Notice how your mind feels after interactions, confused, anxious, or pressured. Notice how your decisions shift when under their influence. Do you question your judgment or act against your own instincts? These subtle effects are the energy of manipulation at work. Manipulation is rarely obvious in the moment. It accumulates gradually like water wearing down rock. Transparency, in contrast, is immediate, clear, and forthright. The essence of manipulation over transparency lies in intent. The manipulator acts to serve themselves, often at the expense of others, while a transparent person acts to communicate honestly, regardless of personal gain or discomfort. Recognizing this distinction is critical for protecting your energy, your clarity, and your boundaries. Once you understand that manipulation is deliberate and systematic, you begin to see patterns where others see only confusion. You start to notice how charm is used as camouflage, how empathy is feigned as leverage, and how trust is weaponized to control. One of the most insidious tools in the arsenal of an evil or toxic person is the projection of guilt and blame. This is not merely an occasional defense mechanism. It is a deliberate strategy designed to control, manipulate, and destabilize those around them. People who operate this way are masters at shifting responsibility away from themselves, ensuring that you carry the weight of accountability for situations that are not yours. They create a world where your sense of morality, empathy, and conscience becomes a weapon against you, leaving you second, guessing every thought, every action, and every word. The projection of guilt is subtle, often so seamless that it is difficult to detect until it has taken root. They will craft scenarios in which your intentions, no matter how pure, are painted as selfish, inadequate, or harmful. A minor mistake on your part becomes a catastrophe in their narrative, while their own misdeeds are hidden, minimized, or reframed to appear inconsequential. This imbalance creates confusion and self-doubt, eroding your confidence gradually. Over time, you may start apologizing for things you never did just to restore temporary peace or avoid conflict. And this is precisely what the manipulator wants: control through internalized guilt. Blame is the companion to guilt. While guilt forces you to question yourself, blame forces you to defend yourself continuously. They never acknowledge their role in any conflict or problem. Instead, they turn every interaction into a subtle trial where you are always on the defensive. The evil person understands the psychology of shame. They know that humans are wired to respond to criticism, accusation, and perceived failure. By projecting blame outward, they make you feel responsible for their dissatisfaction, their anger, or their disappointment, even when it has nothing to do with you. You may leave conversations feeling exhausted, demoralized, or guilty, unable to pinpoint the source of the emotional drain because their manipulation is embedded in the subtleties of tone, body language, and phrasing. Projection works because it exploits your willingness to be fair and just. When a person accuses you unjustly, your instinct is to analyze, explain, and clarify to seek resolution. A transparent and honest person engages in this process openly and equitably. But the manipulator uses it to entrap you. They twist your attempts at explanation into admissions of guilt. They reinterpret your defense as further evidence of wrongdoing. Every conversation becomes a labyrinth where the exit is constantly moving, and the exit is your own peace of mind. They often employ emotional triggers as amplifiers for projection. A manipulator knows the buttons to push: your insecurities, your past mistakes, your fears, your empathy. These buttons allow them to direct your energy towards self-doubt rather than clarity. For example, a subtle comment that seems casual may be loaded with implication. I thought you cared about me, but I guess I was wrong. Or, I can't believe you did that. I thought you were better than this. In these moments, the responsibility for their disappointment is thrust onto you while they remain untouched by accountability. This is projection in action, skillful, precise, and devastating to those untrained in recognizing it. Projection of guilt and blame is not only interpersonal, it also shapes your perception of reality. Over time, constant exposure to this behavior can distort your sense of morality and judgment. You may begin to see yourself as the problem in every conflict, questioning whether your instincts, decisions, or feelings are valid. Their energy infiltrates your mind, planting seeds of doubt that grow into patterns of self-blame. This mental fog is intentional. It is a methodical erosion of clarity, self-esteem, and independence. An evil person will also manipulate group dynamics to reinforce guilt and blame. In social or professional settings, they may position themselves as the victim or moral authority, subtly turning others against you or questioning your credibility. You are left defending yourself not just against them, but against the social pressure they generate. Their ability to shift blame becomes amplified when it is witnessed by others, creating a cycle of doubt that is nearly impossible to break without acute awareness. Transparency, fairness, and accountability are irrelevant to them. Their objective is always control, and projection is a highly effective tool to achieve it. Recognizing projection requires keen observation of patterns rather than isolated incidents. Ask yourself, is the blame consistent, one-sided, or disproportionate? Does the person take responsibility for their own role? Are minor issues magnified while their own faults are invisible? The answers reveal the structure of their manipulation. A healthy interaction allows for shared responsibility. A manipulative dynamic is always skewed toward you absorbing guilt and blame. Emotional resilience is essential in countering projection. Once you understand that their accusations are reflections of their intent and not your worth, you can begin to detach. You no longer accept responsibility for their feelings, moods, or misdeeds. You begin to see the difference between what is true and what is being projected onto you. But this awareness requires practice, vigilance, and trust in your own perception, because the manipulator thrives on uncertainty. They rely on the fog of self-doubt to obscure reality and create dependency. Projection of guilt and blame is also a test of boundaries. The evil person constantly probes to see how far they can push, how much you will internalize, and how much you will defend. Every apology they extract, every concession you make, strengthens their perception of control. If unchecked, this behavior can create long-term patterns where your self-worth becomes intertwined with their approval or judgment. They are experts at conditioning responses, creating cycles of guilt and atonement that serve their agenda while eroding your autonomy. The final element of projection is that it is never random, it is purposeful. Every accusation, every insinuation, every emotional maneuver is designed to make you carry weight that is not yours. They rarely slip by accident, and their intent is masked by feigned concern, reason, or logic. The more subtle they are, the more dangerous, because subtlety allows them to manipulate without detection. You are not imagining it, and you are not being overly sensitive. Your instincts are correct. The projection of guilt and blame is an art form for the manipulative, a systematic strategy to dominate perception, control emotion, and suppress independence. One of the most deceptive tools an evil person wields is charm. At first glance, charm seems harmless, even desirable. It is easy to mistake charm for charisma, kindness, or confidence, but in the hands of a manipulative person, it becomes a weapon. Charm is not an expression of genuine warmth. It is a calculated strategy to mask intentions, lower defenses, and gain influence. The evil person understands that humans are naturally drawn to likable, confident, and engaging individuals, and they exploit this instinct with precision. They can wrap their darkness in a smile, laughter, and eloquent words, making you feel comfortable, appreciated, and even inspired, while the truth of their energy remains hidden beneath the surface. Charm as a weapon is subtle, almost imperceptible at first. It often begins with attention. The manipulative person notices small details about you, compliments qualities you rarely acknowledge in yourself, and mirrors your emotions to create a sense of intimacy. This mirroring is strategic, it builds trust and lowers your natural defenses. You feel understood, seen, and valued, and in that moment, their intentions remain invisible. What appears to be connection is often a carefully constructed illusion designed to lure you into vulnerability. Evil people understand the power of emotional attachment, and charm is the bait they use to initiate it. A key feature of charm as a weapon is inconsistency. Their outward presentation is one of warmth, generosity, and attentiveness, but beneath it lies manipulation, calculation, and self-interest. The moments of charm are often intense, leaving a strong impression, and then they are punctuated with coldness, subtle criticism, or calculated distance. This oscillation creates dependency. You begin to crave the warmth and approval they occasionally offer, while excusing or rationalizing their negative behavior. The charm becomes addictive, a trap that keeps you tethered to their influence. In this way, charm is not a gift, it is a lure, a tool for control. The manipulative charm often targets your ego and self-image. Compliments are rarely neutral. They are strategically chosen to highlight desires, insecurities, or ambitions. They may praise your intelligence, beauty, or compassion in ways that make you feel exceptional. But this sense of elevation is a form of subtle control. By positioning themselves as someone who recognizes your value, they create a sense of indebtedness or loyalty. You start to associate their presence with validation, forgetting that true recognition does not come with hidden strings. Charm as a weapon operates by creating dependency on external approval while masking the erosion of your internal autonomy. Flattery, another tool of charm, is never random. The evil person understands psychological triggers and uses compliments to manipulate emotions. They will notice what you value about yourself and reflect it back in ways that feel affirming, while simultaneously nudging your decisions, beliefs, or actions to align with their agenda. Compliments may be paired with subtle criticism or comparison to others, creating a dynamic where you seek their approval to feel secure. Charm, in this sense, becomes a form of emotional puppetry where your feelings, reactions, and choices are subtly guided by someone whose intentions are not aligned with your well-being. Charm as a weapon also operates through the appearance of generosity and thoughtfulness. Gifts, favors, and gestures of kindness are rarely given freely. They are strategic investments. The manipulative person understands that human behavior is influenced by reciprocity, so each act of apparent kindness is a calculated step in creating obligation, dependence, or influence. You may feel gratitude, admiration, or even affection in response, but these feelings are being directed and shaped to serve the manipulator's purpose. Genuine kindness does not calculate impact, but charm wielded as a weapon is always deliberate, always aimed at control. An essential aspect of charm is timing. The evil person knows when to reveal it and when to conceal it, often saving their most engaging and magnetic behavior for moments when they need leverage or when you are most vulnerable. They understand the psychology of contrast. Moments of warmth followed by distance or criticism create an emotional pendulum that draws you closer and keeps you off balance. You begin to measure their affection, analyze their words, and interpret their intentions constantly. This mental and emotional energy becomes a tool for them, a measure of your investment in their presence. Charm is never simply a social skill. It is a lever of influence, subtly reshaping your emotions and perceptions to align with their objectives. Charm as a weapon also obscures accountability. While a transparent, honest person expresses themselves directly and consistently, the manipulator hides behind a lure wit or persuasive presence. Missteps, cruelty, or manipulation can be reframed as misunderstandings, jokes, or acts of care. The charm acts as a shield, diverting attention from intent and behavior. You are left questioning whether you are overreacting, whether you misinterpreted their words, or whether you are too sensitive. This self-doubt is intentional, for it keeps you vulnerable and more likely to accept further manipulation. Finally, the danger of charm lies in its ability to mask truth. It creates a veneer of safety, trust, and even admiration, while the person's motives remain hidden. They may laugh with you, share personal stories, or appear supportive, but all of this is layered with strategy. The underlying intent is rarely benevolent. Charm is the velvet glove over a fist of control. It draws you in, distracts you, and manipulates your perception. Once you recognize that charm is being weaponized, it becomes easier to detach emotionally, to observe patterns, and to reclaim your autonomy. But until that recognition occurs, charm can be as binding as chains, subtle yet unbreakable, compelling you to question reality, loyalty, and trust. Subtle sabotage is one of the most insidious methods an evil person uses to manipulate, control, and undermine those around them. Unlike overt hostility or aggression, subtle sabotage is hidden, almost imperceptible, which makes it far more dangerous. It does not announce itself with loud accusations or visible attacks. Instead, it creeps in gradually, eroding your confidence, destabilizing your progress, and creating doubt in ways so quiet that you may not even notice until significant damage has been done. To understand subtle sabotage, one must first recognize that it operates in the shadows of perception, where words, actions, and intentions are carefully masked, leaving the victim questioning their own judgment and reality. Subtle sabotage often begins with small, almost innocuous actions. The manipulative person may forget to provide information you need, misdirect you in conversations, or withhold support at critical moments. These actions are not random mistakes. They are deliberate attempts to slow your progress, create frustration, or make you feel incompetent. You may chalk it up to oversight or miscommunication, convincing yourself that the negative consequences are not personal. This is precisely what the saboteur wants, for their interference to remain invisible while their control over your circumstances quietly strengthens. One of the most effective forms of subtle sabotage is undermining confidence. They may question your decisions in ways that seem like concern or guidance, planting seeds of doubt that grow over time. For example, they might say, "Are you sure you want to do it that way? It might be risky," or "I don't know if you're ready for that." On the surface, it appears helpful, even caring, but the underlying intent is to destabilize your self-assurance and make you reliant on their judgment. Subtle sabotage often masquerades as advice, mentorship, or constructive criticism, but it always serves the saboteur's interest, not your growth. Subtle sabotage is also emotional. Evil people understand that psychological disruption is far more effective than direct confrontation. They may withhold affection, create invisible competition, or induce guilt to manipulate your behavior. These tactics leave you second, guessing yourself, anxious about your standing, and constantly attempting to gain approval. Over time, this erodes not only your confidence but also your independence, making you more susceptible to further manipulation. The subtlety is what makes it dangerous. If it were obvious, you would naturally resist, but in its quiet form, it infiltrates your mind like a whisper that grows louder over time. Another hallmark of subtle sabotage is strategic timing. The manipulative person carefully chooses moments when you are most vulnerable, emotionally, mentally, or physically, to intervene in ways that create maximum disruption. This might be during periods of high stress, important decisions, or moments of achievement. By introducing doubt, distraction, or minor setbacks at these critical junctures, they ensure that their influence has the most impact. The timing is never accidental. It is calculated to exploit your vulnerabilities while maintaining plausible deniability, making you question whether the interference is intentional or coincidental. Subtle sabotage also operates in social contexts. The manipulative person may quietly spread misinformation, omit key details, or subtly misrepresent situations to others, thereby undermining your credibility without overt confrontation. They may frame your successes as luck, dismiss your ideas quietly in meetings, or plant doubts about your reliability in the minds of others. This form of sabotage is particularly dangerous because it affects both your internal perception and your external reputation simultaneously. The damage occurs gradually, often leaving you isolated, misunderstood, or questioning whether others view you fairly. It is also essential to recognize that subtle sabotage often hides behind charm and likability. The evil person may appear supportive, friendly, and even caring, creating a confusing contrast between outward behavior and underlying intent. Their sabotage is hidden within actions that seem helpful or neutral. A seemingly innocent comment, a small delay, or a piece of advice can all be vehicles for undermining your stability. The contrast between their pleasant demeanor and the effects of their actions creates cognitive dissonance, making it difficult to trust your instincts and see their true intentions clearly. Subtle sabotage targets patterns and routines. The manipulative person learns your habits, strengths, and weaknesses, using this knowledge to introduce minor disruptions that ripple outward. A misplaced task, a forgotten commitment, or an understated critique can destabilize your momentum, leaving you frustrated or anxious. Over time, these minor interferences accumulate, affecting your performance, emotional well-being, and sense of control. The sabotage is invisible because each act is small enough to dismiss individually, but collectively, it creates significant impact. Another key aspect is emotional manipulation combined with sabotage. The manipulative person often creates guilt or obligation alongside minor disruptions, making you question whether you are overreacting or failing in your responsibilities. They are experts at creating a sense of imbalance where you feel compelled to correct, explain, or accommodate, thereby wasting your energy and focus. Your attention is diverted from your priorities while they maintain the subtle upper hand. The emotional and cognitive load this creates is intentional, a precise method of control that undermines your independence while leaving the saboteur's intentions well hidden. Recognizing subtle sabotage requires keen observation, self-awareness, and the ability to track patterns over time. One must pay attention not only to immediate effects but also to the cumulative impact of repeated interactions. Ask yourself, do I feel drained, doubting myself, or off balance after interactions with this person? Are important moments, achievements, or responsibilities subtly disrupted in ways that seem intentional? Do their words, gestures, or actions carry hidden implications that benefit them while hindering me? Awareness is the first step in breaking free from subtle sabotage, for only when you see the pattern can you begin to protect your energy, assert boundaries, and reclaim your autonomy. Subtle sabotage thrives on invisibility, relying on your rationalization, empathy, and tendency to give others the benefit of the doubt. It works because most people cannot imagine that someone so outwardly kind, engaging, or supportive could harbor intentions that are quietly destructive. The evil person depends on this disbelief, knowing that their actions will go unchallenged and that their control can expand without confrontation. The quiet, almost imperceptible nature of subtle sabotage makes it one of the most effective tools for manipulation, ensuring that the victim remains unaware of the erosion until it has already taken significant toll. One of the most revealing signs of an evil or toxic person is a profound lack of empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand, feel, and respond to the emotions of others. It is the bridge between individuals that allows compassion, connection, and genuine care to flourish. When a person is devoid of empathy, they cannot truly see the world from another's perspective, and they often treat emotions as tools rather than truths. The absence of empathy is not always loud or aggressive. In many cases, it is subtle, hidden behind charm, intellect, or social skill. But if you pay attention to the energy and behavior of the person in your life, you will notice a pattern. A lack of genuine concern for your feelings, repeated disregard for boundaries, and an inability to recognize the impact of their actions on others. People who lack empathy often mirror emotions convincingly without actually experiencing them. They may appear to understand your pain, excitement, or fear, but this understanding is superficial. It is a performance, a calculated act designed to influence your behavior or perception. They study human reactions, learning how to provoke, soothe, or manipulate, but the emotions never truly reach them. This ability to mimic emotion makes them particularly dangerous because it can be difficult to distinguish authentic care from manipulation. The key is to observe consistency. Someone with empathy responds naturally and appropriately across different situations, while a person who lacks it reacts selectively, often to serve their own agenda. A lack of empathy is also evident in how they respond to suffering. When confronted with another person's pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, an empathetic person will naturally adjust their behavior, offering support, understanding, or space. Someone without empathy, however, may dismiss, minimize, or exploit the suffering. They may turn the focus back onto themselves, question the validity of your experience, or ignore it entirely. Their responses are never guided by genuine concern. They are guided by strategy. Even when they appear to comfort, the comfort is often calculated, designed to maintain control, gain trust, or manipulate perception. Manipulative people without empathy also use moral detachment as a weapon. They rarely feel guilt or remorse for actions that harm others. Where empathy would prompt reflection, apology, or correction, they remain unbothered. Their lack of emotional resonance allows them to act in ways that others would find intolerable without experiencing inner conflict. This detachment makes them extremely efficient in exploiting situations, as they can make decisions based purely on gain, influence, or self-interest, unconcerned with ethical or emotional consequences. Their absence of empathy is a protective mechanism, shielding them from moral discomfort, while enabling manipulation and control. Another hallmark of this lack is the use of others as tools. Individuals without empathy rarely see people as complete beings with thoughts, feelings, and intrinsic value. Instead, they perceive them as means to an end, resources to extract attention, validation, status, or advantage. Relationships are transactional, emotions are negotiable, and loyalty is conditional. This mindset allows them to manipulate without hesitation, to betray without remorse, and to exploit without consequence. When you interact with such a person, you may feel invisible, unheard, or unimportant, despite their outward charm or charisma. Your needs and boundaries are secondary, subordinate to their objectives. The absence of empathy also manifests in emotional responses or the lack thereof. These individuals struggle to read or respond appropriately to emotional cues. They may laugh at misfortune, remain indifferent to distress, or react in ways that seem incongruent with the situation. Even when they perform empathy, it is often delayed, calculated, or exaggerated in a way that feels theatrical rather than authentic. This emotional disconnect is disorienting because it conflicts with human expectations. Most people instinctively respond to others' feelings, so when someone does not, it creates unease, confusion, and subtle mistrust. A lack of empathy is particularly insidious in close relationships. Evil or toxic people often manipulate emotions to maintain control. They may provoke feelings of guilt, shame, or fear, then exploit those feelings to ensure compliance or obedience. They may dismiss or trivialize your emotions while exaggerating their own, creating an imbalance where your emotional world is devalued and theirs is magnified. This imbalance fosters dependence, self-doubt, and insecurity. The victim becomes increasingly attentive to the manipulator's needs and reactions while suppressing their own, a dynamic that reinforces the manipulator's power. Recognizing the absence of empathy requires careful observation of patterns rather than isolated incidents. Ask yourself, does this person consistently acknowledge and respect the emotions of others, or do they selectively respond when it serves them? Do they take responsibility for the consequences of their actions on others, or do they dismiss, blame, or manipulate? Are their interactions emotionally reciprocal, or is there a persistent imbalance where their needs, desires, and feelings dominate? Consistent inability to empathize is a clear signal of underlying malice, a trait that cannot be masked indefinitely. The lack of empathy is also closely tied to other manipulative behaviors such as projection, subtle sabotage, and charm as a weapon. Because they do not genuinely feel the impact of their actions on others, they can manipulate, deceive, and control without hesitation. The emotional disconnect allows them to observe and exploit human vulnerabilities with surgical precision. The absence of empathy turns relationships into arenas for influence rather than connection, creating cycles of dependence, manipulation, and subtle control that are difficult to break without acute awareness. Finally, this lack of empathy is a reflection of inner darkness rather than superficial flaws. While everyone occasionally fails to empathize, those who consistently lack it operate from a place of self-interest, detachment, and sometimes malice. They understand human emotion intellectually but remain unaffected emotionally. This creates a dangerous combination: the capacity to analyze, predict, and manipulate emotions without being bound by ethical or compassionate restraint. Their absence of empathy is both their power and their threat, shaping interactions, relationships, and environments in ways that quietly serve their agenda while leaving others unaware of the true impact on their lives.